Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So I am back today to do the book Postscript Tag for 2022. This is a video that people tend to do at the end of each year to kind of reflect on our year of reading. I believe it was originally created by Adam over at Memento Mori. And yeah, let's just hop right into these questions and take a look at my year in reading 2022. Question number one is the longest book you read this year and the book that took you the longest to finish. Technically, the book that both took me the longest to finish and was the longest that I read this year was my reread of The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, though it was technically a re-listen. I was listening to the Ben Miles audiobook, and it was a book that I had read prior to 2022. So in order to keep this question to books that I read for the first time in 2022, I think the longest book that I read that was a first time read in 2022 was Power and Thrones by Dan Jones, which I have right here, and this one clocks in with notes at the end as well at 704 pages. So, you know, a pretty chunky term. And as previously stated, The Mirror and the Light was the book that probably took me the longest to read, because I did start re-listening to this back in, I want to say August of 2021, and it was only, I think, in October that I actually finished it off. So over a year to do this audiobook. But the thing about the Wolf Hall trilogy is that I feel like I can just go to them at any time. I don't need to go right back to the beginning to pick up from where I left off. I also wanted to give a quick note to Black and British by David Olusoga. This was a book that took me several months to read during 2022, which I started in 2022. This was probably the work of about 5 or 6 months, but was also a brilliant, brilliant book. Question number two is a book you read that was outside of your comfort zone. Now, because I was part of a book club this year, a book club in my real life, there were quite a few books that we read that were outside my comfort zone, but unfortunately for quite a few of them, I didn't end up actually finishing them because they were just so outside my comfort zone and I just didn't want to keep on reading them. In terms of a book that was fairly outside of my comfort zone, in terms of what I usually read, not necessarily in terms of subject, and I did end up finishing and enjoying, was 5 Straight Lines by Andrew Gant. This is a history of music. Once again, quite a chunky tome. This is over 600 pages. And I just hadn't read anything really that was on the history of music. And now that I have gotten to this, I am really, really keen to pick up other books on this subject. Maybe that'll be like a new niche interest of mine. Question number 3 is how many books did you reread and what was your favourite reread? I did say last year that I wanted to kind of cut down on the amount that I was rereading, and I did stick to that at the beginning of the year, to be fair. But there were definitely books that I read during this year that I enjoyed so much that I wanted to reread them, and I think that ended up spurring me on to rereading other books that I hadn't just read in 2022, books that I'd read before. So in total, I read 8 books that I had read for the first time prior to 2022. Those books were Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, Persuasion by Jane Austen, The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, Troy by Stephen Fry, Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And then for the books that I read for the first time in 2022 and then ended up rereading them during the course of the year, I have You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. I think I read that probably 3 times in total in 2022. The 4th book in the Bridgerton series, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. I think I ended up reading that twice. When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare is probably my most reread or re-listened to book. I can't even count how many times I went back to that book. It's at least 5. And then Unequal Affections by Laura S. Ormanston. I can never remember the name of that author, mainly because there isn't a physical copy. I have to listen to it on audio. If I had a physical copy, I'd be able to remember it. But yeah, as you can see, in terms of books that I read for the first time in 2022 and then went back to, it is all romance books. And I think that's just because I was finding them to be such a comfort read or comfort re-listen to the ones that I listened to on audiobook. There were just quite a few times where I needed that this year. Question number 4 is a book that you read for the first time that you look forward to rereading in the future. Of course, any of the books that I mentioned, those past 4 romance books, I probably will come back to at some point. But in terms of one that I haven't actually reread since, I do think that Anne of Green Gables might be one of those books. It is just so lovely and cozy and comforting. Actually, thinking back, I do believe that I found the audiobook a couple of months ago and I started listening to the first couple of chapters. I didn't go through the entire book again, but I just wanted like a little bit of Anne in my life because I hadn't read it for a while. So that's really nice. And I'm sure I'll come back to that again. Question number 5 is favourite single short story or novella. Probably my favourite one is the first book that I read in 2022, and that is Galatea by Madeline Miller. This is a little novella, a little short story, which is a retelling of Galatea and Pygmalion, and I just think this is really brilliant. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I read it at the beginning of the year, and also I think because I had just finished a production of My Fair Lady when I read this, I was really poised to enjoy this. For those of you who don't know, My Fair Lady is a musical retelling of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, which in turn is a, well, for his time, modern adaptation of the Pygmalion myth, just taken obviously from ancient Greece and mythology into Edwardian Britain. So a lot of the themes that this book plays with were in my head, and yeah, I just think it's really fantastic. Question number 6 is mass appeal, a book that you liked and would recommend to a wide variety of readers. I really did think long and hard about this one, like what is a book that is going to appeal to a lot of different people, and the one that I've come to that I really would recommend to everybody is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I just feel like there's so much in this book that will just appeal to lots of different readers. So first off, you do have the sci-fi element, there is a time travel element with this book, but for me, as somebody who is not really much of a sci-fi reader, it wasn't too much. I wasn't getting too bogged out because there isn't like technical detail. We don't really know why it is that the main character, Dana, is time traveling. Maybe that will annoy some people who really like their hard magic systems where everything does make sense and there's logic and reasoning for everything, but I find it really nice. She's time traveling into the past, into the 19th century, so there is a good amount of historical fiction writing here, but also because she is a modern woman, and by modern I mean modern to the time the book was written, which was the 1970s, you do get like this contemporary modern perspective, even though it was technically 50 years ago now. Wow. A historic setting, but contemporary attitudes and a contemporary lens on the historic events that are happening. Rather than reading about the history and the historical attitudes, a lot of the time with classics, you're reading it and you're having to filter it through this, well, it was a different time back then, and we have different modern attitudes to the ones that they do. A lot of the time people are filtering it through that kind of lens, whereas this book is very much saying, no, this was wrong, and you are meant to know that this is wrong. So I feel like people who often have a hard time with classics and historical fiction because they have a hard time being able to read about like very tough topics and reading about these historical attitudes, whether that is to race or class or gender, might actually be able to get on board with this one because that is definitely part of the commentary. The writing in here is really lovely, but it's also like not inaccessible. It is easy to read. It is not complex, like dense, flowery language. And yet I also wouldn't say that it's simplistic. I just think it's a fantastic book and everybody should read it. Number 7, Specialised Appeal, a book that you liked but would be hesitant to recommend to just anyone. Once again, we are going to 5 straight lines. I think there is a level of like musical theory knowledge that you would need to have to read this. I read this having done my grade 5 music theory, having done like many years of instrument lessons, and there were a lot of the time moments where I was like, I can't quite remember what that terminology means. And I feel like that could take some people out of reading this for the first time, rather than it being like a good introduction to music history. I feel like a lot of music history is kind of written like you will know what this means rather than explaining to you along the way. Brilliant book. Just, you know, tread with caution. Then question number 8 is reflect on your year as a bookish content creator, goals met, good bad memories, favourite videos you made, etc. So in terms of goals met, I am filming this on the 27th of December and I am this close to having read more books this year than I have read in any other year. I actually over Christmas have taken a few days off from reading, so I have slowed my pace down a little bit, but currently I have read 128 books and I just need to read 3 more books this year to have read more books than I have at least since I started recording the books I read on Goodreads. Either 2019 or 2020, I read 130 books. So if I read 3 more, that will be 131 and the most that I've ever read. And I really want to do it now. I said at the beginning of the month that I wasn't going to force it, I wasn't going to try and do it, but now I'm so close. I did buy quite a few little books to be able to help me on my way, so we'll see how we go. One of the goals that I wasn't doing very well at the beginning of the year, but actually I feel like I've gotten back on track with, is doing more individual book reviews. I did slow my pace on those this month because I was trying to do Vlogmas, which I mean I did get ill towards the end of Vlogmas, so I didn't end up doing all 25 videos. I only managed to do 22, but I'm still pretty proud of that, and I do have full plans to go back to doing individual book reviews next year. It was just with Vlogmas it would have been a bit too much to do that. But then also in terms of some of my favourite videos, the videos that I'm most proud of from this year, I'm really proud of my historical fiction timeline video. That was just like a weird idea that I had, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I'm really proud of Herstory-a-thon that I hosted with Brittany over at Literarily Smitten, and I'm very much up for doing that again next year. I really enjoyed my House of the Dragon book recommendations videos where I was taking like historical non-fiction that you can read if you're getting into House of the Dragon, the new TV series. That's the prequel to Game of Thrones. Not many people watch that, but I was pretty pleased with it. And once again, like I am really proud of the individual book reviews that I've done over the past few months, because I had kind of been putting off doing individual book reviews for such a long time because I just thought I wasn't very good at them. I still don't think I'm great at them, but I feel like I'm gaining confidence in them, like finding my style, finding ways of talking about books in a little bit more depth and detail, and yeah, I really enjoy it. So that is the end of the tag. Question number 9 is to tag some fellow bookish content creators. I feel like with this one, people just tend to do it around this time as and when they feel like they can do it or want to do it. So I will tag some people, but there is no pressure. Do let me know if any answers you have to these questions in the comment section down below. I would love to hear from you, especially about like some of your favourite books that you've read this year. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.